Twitter is Twitter is always interesting. Came across a tweet from the New York Post talking about this young girl who is a New York medic. It says New York medic helped make ends meet with racy OnlyFans side gig. Now this, of course, is becoming quite normal. There's been I've seen numerous posts of, nursing student that does OnlyFans, race car driver does OnlyFans, FDNY worker does OnlyFans. This is becoming quite normal nowadays, where many of the young women that you're going to come across, there could be a good chance that you might come across a young woman like this. You might think nothing out of the ordinary, but she is, of course, soliciting online, either with nude pictures, videos, etc. And of course, a lot of these women are following in the lead of many of the women who, in essence, advocate for them. Like, for example, AOC, right? AOC, #1 in the chat with 286,000 likes. It says, "Leave her alone." The actual scandalous headline is, "Medics in the United States need 2 jobs to survive." And of course, if you don't know anything about AOC, AOC actually came from a fairly middle-class, wealthy family. She had a mom. She grew up with a mother and father, but in her teenage years, I believe her father died. And as a result of his death, as you know, 2-income households do better than, obviously, single moms. Single moms typically are on the low end of the spectrum when it comes to income. But obviously, if you have a man in the home, typically, especially older men, start to make more money into their 30s, 40s, and start to peak between their 40s and 50s. And so that was around the age that her father had passed away. And so with that went a lot of the wealth that they had in the family. And as a result of that, AOC had to go to work. She eventually became a bartender, and she went to school, etc. And from there, she went into politics. But if you actually pay attention to her life, you would understand why she advocates for the things that she does, because she understands the value of having men in her life, like, for example, her father, but does not advocate for what a lot of these young women need, which is a man in the home to help them to survive. Instead, they advocate for these women to remain single, even though she herself is not single. Many of these women talk about female empowerment, that they can do everything on their own. Yet many of these women, like, for example, Cardi B, who talks a lot about female empowerment, herself is also, of course, not single. She is, of course, married. And a lot of these women are typically backed by men or work for men. Many of these women who work in either large offices or for big business are typically there working for other men. And usually the government forces many of these big businesses to employ these women. Otherwise, the government, in essence, will fine them. We've seen that a lot lately with diversity hires. The same thing within colleges. There was always this push to get more women into college, and now women outnumber the amount of men who are in college. About 60% of the people who hold degrees nowadays are typically women. It's one of the reasons why you hear, for example, like Joe Biden talking about we're going to slash student aid, is because the vast majority of student aid in terms of loans is held by women. And so the government, in essence, indents them. Right? They basically turn many of these young women into indentured servants. They work for the government to pay off many of the loans. They work a lot of these low-end jobs. And this is typically what happens. And this is obviously done purposefully. It's not by accident that this happens. This is much easier to manipulate men and to manipulate individuals who vote, which women make up 52% of those who vote in the United States. And of course, as a result, many of them will vote for socialistic programs. But when you actually look at women who are married, they typically vote for Republicans. They typically vote for lower taxes, smaller government, because they don't want the resources taken from their husbands and then given to other individuals. They want those resources to remain with their family instead of being given to other individuals. And this is just basically what it boils down to. It just basically boils down to resources. And so you'll see other individuals in the chat who will say that she doesn't need 2 jobs to survive. It says she needed 2 jobs because she wanted a Gucci bag and a Lexus. Don't kid yourself. But then you'll have other individuals, like for example here, it says 52K is closer to 30K when you talk about taxes and what you bring home, which of course is not true. A simple Google search will show that it really is about 41,000, but that has nothing to do with it. Really is just betas advocating, of course, for women, even to the point where you have individuals who, of course, who are doctors, who advocate for this exact same thing, right? At least this woman didn't do something highly unethical, like make money, for instance, getting paid by Donald Trump. And this is the rhetoric, of course, that you'll talk about. And when you go through a lot of the female posts, it all is advocating that this is totally okay. There's nothing wrong with it. The real crime is this. It's not that this woman is on here basically selling sex on the internet. And this is basically what it is. It's mild forms of prostitution. And of course, when you see, in essence, an economic collapse, or when you see governments collapse, like for example, the numerous times that I've been to Colombia, you will come across some of the most beautiful women that you've ever come across in your life. And a lot of them are prostitutes that come from Venezuela. Or if you go, for example, to places like Medellin. Medellin in the downtown area is basically a cesspool at night for prostitution. You will come across some very beautiful women. I've met women who actually had jobs and even had either apartments or they owned their own home, but many of them basically did this on the side where they would come for a weekend, they'd stay. I've met Americans abroad. I've gone to different countries and I will come across American women that do the exact same thing. They'll go there and they will, in essence, solicit themselves or prostitute themselves for a short period of time. They're out there for the weekend. They're looking for a sugar daddy, or they're looking for some pay to play action out there. This is what you come across. And a lot of it revolves around, of course, the degradation within many countries and the degradation within women, which is a reflection of the degradation that exists within men nowadays. So this, of course, doesn't surprise me. It's one of the reasons why it's very hard for a lot of young men to get into a relationship, because this is what you come across. You might meet this girl at a bar thinking she's a great opportunity, not realizing that she is in essence soliciting prostitution on the side. And this is what you have to pick from. It's one of the reasons why I don't even bother dating in the West, because this is a lot of what you come across. If you've gone out to places like, for example, you go to any clubs out here in New York or in Florida, this is what you will come across. You'll come across a lot of young women who in essence are out there, but they're slanging it. They're basically selling their bodies to the highest bidder. I've gone out to clubs in Florida, and a lot of this is what you find. You get a lot of them that come from Georgia or that come from ATL, and they'll come down to places like Florida, and they'll literally solicit themselves in the club. This is by no means abnormal. And of course, if you take part in this, then as the man, you are the low life, etc. But the female is looked at as, oh, you poor thing that you had to do this. Even politicians, of course, will advocate for you instead of saying that this is actually wrong because it screws up your head. Number two, when men come across this, they will never take you seriously. They'll just think you're a prostitute. They'll think you're a slut. And of course, individuals like this will try to get men to downplay it. Oh, it's not that serious. This is normal. This is okay. And it's absolutely not. This is something that as men, we should never be willing to get involved with, because this is what leads to breakdowns in relationships. It makes it real easy for the state to basically extract resources. Either you get Me Too, the relationship breaks up, the marriage falls apart, you end up getting taken to family court. Don't do it. But this, in essence, in America and in much of the West, is the new normal.